My name is Felicia Jordan, and this is...
My name is Michael Lincoln McCrae. I'm the co-chair of Advocacy, Florida.
And I am the director of Social Security Payee Program in Disability Rights Florida. And we're here to talk to you today about supported decision making. How many people already got a copy of the Disability Rights Florida transitional guides for the young adults? So we have, if you go to our booth at 500, we have transitional guides that just came out this week, and they basically kind of a soups to nuts from a young person's point of view in regarding transitioning from being a, I would say young person to adulthood. So it deals with like driver's license, getting services from schools, contacting VRs, applying for public benefits, all kinds of things in regarding where a young person has to deal with stuff on a day-to-day basis, but it's directed at a person with a disability. So it's a great guide, and if you don't, it's free. Just pick it up. It's a hefty thing, so you'll be able to get a lot of information from it. We also, with the slap bracelets, we have a QRC code, that's for the young people. I'm like, okay, I am old enough for something to come back. Daddy! So, they have slap bracelets and do the QRC code, your phone, it does have an electronic version of the transition guide. So, that being said, shameless plug, we're doing that. So this is going to be really brief. I just do like a disclaimer at the front of my presentation saying, hey, this is informational purposes and all of that stuff. And that we're, if you need questions regarding an attorney or an advocate, please call us. And we're free and confidential. We don't charge for our services to our clients. And all you have to be is an individual with a disability. And we don't have the income guidelines or anything like that. We advocate in many areas, including education, employment, housing, medical services, access to the community, dealing with APD, dealing with VR, dealing with different Medicaid and Medicare services, Social Security if it's a barrier to employment, or questions with repayment situations. So there's a lot of stuff. So if you don't mind, just give us a call. We'd be more than happy to help you. All right, so what we're going to go over today. What are least restrictive alternatives to guardianship known as supported decision making, how it works, and what is usually found in an agreement, and how to recognize decision making rights. And we're promoting self-determination and autonomy when working with people who are older or have a disability. So our speakers today is Mr. Lincoln McCrae, as well as myself. So we're just giving out a little introduction. And I'm going to let Mike handle it and give you his journey from guardianship to supported decision making.
Good evening. My name is Michael Lincoln McCrae. I'm the co-chair of Advocacy, Florida. I wear many hats around the state of Florida. I'm also a security officer for Victory Security Services in St. Lucie County. Back in 2014, I had my rights fully taken away and placed in full guardianship, where I was very restrictive on where I can go, where I can do, what friends I can have. Back in 2016, I won my rights back and was named the first person in the state of Florida to have supported decision making recognized. And right now, I am trying to pass a law for supported decision making here in the state of Florida.
Okay. So we're going to go into some areas, and Mike and I are going to kind of tag team on some information, and hopefully it'll be useful to you. This is going to be an interactive process, so if you have questions, just let us know. So hopefully we can be able to answer them. If not, guess what? I'll look them up. I don't pretend like I know everything. Don't tell the lawyers that. So that's basically what I do. So we're going to talk about them, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Let us know, because we can discuss this. It's going to be kind of an interactive situation, so that way we can get all our answers questions. Because sometimes different things happen in different parts of the state, and sometimes you know something that somebody else may not know, or you've gone through something that may be a helpful suggestion that could help somebody. Okay, so transition purposes. So this happens a lot with school situations. Your young person's about to turn 18, or you're about to turn 18, and the school district's telling you, oh, you need a guardianship in order to be in the IEP meetings now. Okay, they tell that to a lot of parents, and a lot of situations where that happens, they don't understand that guardianship is not cheap. I'm sorry, attorney, that's not cheap. So, according to the IDEA, once a person turns 18, all the rights come from the parent to the child. However, Florida Administrative Code says if they reached it and they don't have the ability to provide informed consent, there's other measures that a parent can use. So, you can go for the guardianship. To me, I'm like, look, I'd rather people use a scalpel versus a machete in that instance, because you may not need a guardianship for everything. So my thing is that's something that one of the reasons we're talking about supported decision making. The other part is to be appointed to represent the educational interests of their student through the student's ability for faith. So there is things like an educational proxy. They're sending those around the state. They're trying to put that in the law. They tried to do it this past legislative session. I'm hoping and crossing my fingers that they ask to pass it this legislative session. But with that, your young adult can appoint you to represent them in IEP meetings. So if the school district is telling you, oh yeah, you need a guardianship, yeah, no. This is the Florida RAP rules and administrative code to say, no, I don't. Or you can have another person do it. If you have a trusted individual that you want them to represent their student's interest, you can do it if the parent is not available. So if they tell you that, no, that's not true, and you have the law to back you up.
And that's current law.
Yes, I always check it every year.
Thank you.
So guardianship, what is it? Okay, so what happens is all the rights that a person under guardianship is, they use the term ward as a term of art. I don't like it, but that's what they use. So if you hear that meaning a ward, that means typically a person under guardianship and not Robin from Batman. So that's typically what they call it. So with that, we have it meaning that the rights of that individual is transferred to a person who's named a guardian. So if the court says they don't have that ability to manage themselves and they feel that person's incapacitated, then they'll have somebody else that make that decision, and that's what's called guardianship. And so there's different type of guardians. So as a parent or loved one, sometimes they're natural guardianships. When you take the baby home from the hospital, it's a natural guardianship. They have full plenary guardianship. That's the one through the court where they take over certain rights. You have guardian advocacy for people who are receiving mental health treatment, and guardian advocacy for people with developmental disability, and there are other kinds. There's a veterans ones. So if you look at Chapter 744 of the Florida State Statute, there are different types of guardianships that you can look into in regarding that. The reason why I'm telling you all of this in regarding supported decision making is I want you to get the most information you can in order to be to be able to figure out what you and your loved one want to do. So we go into natural guardians, and basically, like I said, you bring a baby home from the hospital. Full guardianship, basically, this is where the court says that they can't handle tasks to handle their person or property, and the court rules that person incapacitated. So these are called a full guardianship or plenary guardianship, and this is the most restrictive type, but it's the most common. And even though few people require this guardianship, this is the most common that is in guardianship. So, what can a guardian do? On behalf of somebody else, they can enter contracts. You can sign, any kind of contract on behalf of somebody else. You can sue and defend lawsuits. You can apply for government benefits. You can manage their property, even sell it. Some of the instances we have, there was one case where it was a lady and she had wound up under guardianship. She had a physical impairment, wound up in the hospital. They did emergency guardianship. She wound up with a permanent guardian, and the guardian sold her house, sold her car, sold her anything she had as property, and had her living in an assisted living facility. Once her neurological situation stabilized after the stroke, she didn't need a guardian anymore. But by then, her house was gone, her car was gone, if she had bonds and this and that and the other, all that was gone. It was sold to be put into an estate to use for her care and maintenance. And also guardian fees, whatever fees it comes up. They determine where a resident lives. So if you're under a guardianship, you don't get to decide where you live. The guardian does. And if you have a family member, if you have a professional guardian, and you're a family member, you're like, I want that person to live with me, The guardian can go to court and say, no, 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 I want them somewhere else. And we've had that instance where people were moved and the court was like, okay, and that's it. Consent to mental and medical health treatment, to make decisions about the ward's social environment and other aspects of their life. We've had instances where people were not allowed to have Facebook friends, or allowed to be on Instagram, or allowed to email, or call, or have certain friends, or go to certain places to meet their friends. Once that happens, that guardian, once that right's given over to the guardian, they can make all those decisions without input of that individual under guardianship at all. The rights that can be taken away, the right to marry, that's a contract. I always tell people, how is that a contract? Well, when you ask somebody to marry you, that's part of the contract. Will you marry me? And it's like, okay, usually in contract law, I'm getting lawyers now. So usually in contract law, there's an offer, acceptance, and consideration. So the offer will be, will you marry me? The acceptance is, yes, I will. And then the ring, something of value that you agreed upon, is the acceptance. So, it's the consideration. So basically, it's considered a contract. That right is taken away from you. Right to vote. They take away your right to vote. You're no longer allowed to vote. To apply for government benefits. So if you want to apply for Social Security and your guardian doesn't want to, you can't. To have a driver's license. To travel. To seek and retain employment. I had a case where I had to help an individual because of the fact that they wanted to go to work. They wanted to go to vocational rehabilitation and to be able to take classes and go to work. That's all that person wanted to do. But in the letters of the orders of the guardianship, that was taken away from them. So we actually had to kind of sue in order for them to get a right to work. Legal rights that can't never be taken away. So these are instances where some people get misconstrued, but these are, even under guardianship, the person who's under the guardianship always retain these rights. They have a right to be represented by an attorney at all times. They have a right to go to the court at all times. In fact, there's a law that if somebody feels like they don't need to be under guardianship anymore, it's called suggestion of capacity. They can tell the court, hey, I have recovered, or hey, I have more skills and abilities, and I don't want to be under guardianship anymore. I want this to hold you, judge, to look at this again and see whether or not I can get off from under this guardianship or get some of my rights back. You always have a right to a proper education. A court cannot give that away or take that away. Right to be free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. You have a right to receive necessary services and rehabilitation, and a right to be treated humanely with dignity and respect. So these are things that a court can never take away from that individual, ever.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Because I just heard that about a suggestion of capacity.
Mm-hmm.
What does it take to win one of those in a court? Because would the person need some kind of plan or something? And they would be coming in there and say if they're in some kind of facility, then you've got experts saying, no, I think this person lacks capacity.
But here's the thing, once you answer that, the court's supposed to appoint an attorney for that person under guardianship, and you can work with that attorney, because that attorney will be working for their behalf. And if they have doctor statements as well, because it goes both ways. If they have doctor statements saying, hey, this person can now do X, Y, and Z, they don't need this oversight in this area, then this is a battle of the experts. And that situation will be up to the judge, true enough, but at the same time, they won't be alone in trying to get that done.
But do they actually provide good court-appointed lawyers?
Well, they do with the wheel. So these attorneys that are on the court wheel that will be appointed by the court. And then there's also, there's maybe legal aid services that may be able to provide those services. There's also pro bono attorneys.
That's what I was wondering. So I was wondering if rather than taking a court-appointed lawyer,
you can
is it
also,
any better to apply for pro bono?
You could, and also if you go to the Florida Bar website, they have what they call low cost, no cost on their website. They give you resources in regarding finding a low cost or a pro bono attorney. So if you go to the Florida Bar website, you could be able to get that information.
Thank you.
So need of court authority. These are things that a guardian cannot do without permission from the court. So doing a divorce, having any experimental treatment, committing somebody to an institution, terminating parental rights, trying to get somebody sterilized, or changing their residence from one county to the other. They have to have court permission to do that. So all guardians got to pass a background check. There's certain levels that they have to pass. They also have to have an attorney. You cannot go in by yourself and just do it, and you have to take a training course if you're a non-professional guardian, and you have to take that. Yes?
I had been told that the guardian advocacy, that
That's
parents
different.
can do that on their own.
That's what I'm getting into next. That's
Okay,
something
so
different.
this is just the full-blown, the most restricted guardian.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clearing that.
No problem. Guess what? Right there.
I'm
Guardian
sorry.
advocacy. No problem. The timing was impeccable. Okay, so looking at that, we have a Florida statute where you can petition the court to be a court of guardian advocate with an assistant opinion of a psychiatrist if they, unable to consent to treatment. And this is something different from the full-blown guardianship. This is under 394, so this is under a different area of Florida law. Okay, so under that, so we're looking at this person has a developmental disability, and these are certain rights that the person cannot manage to be removed. So this one, they look a little bit closer on certain rights. So under guardianship, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but they look at, what the person can and cannot do. But with this, they're looking at, for getting to medical procedures, mental health treatments, managing money, governmental benefits, deciding residential choices, and what happens is they're supposed to consider the person's wishes. They're supposed to. And they're supposed to have them fully participate in decision making. So Florida law places the duty on the guardians to notify the court if the person gained capacity or if those rights should be restored to the person under guardianship. Does that always happen? No. Should it happen? Yes. So we're looking at this, and under guardian advocacy, this person will not be determined incapacitated. It costs less. It's still a form of guardianship, but it's less intrusive and less costly. But the person must lack a decision-making ability for some, but not all tasks, and they have to have one of the statutory defined developmental disabilities. So we're looking at an ID, intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, autism, spina bifida, Prader-Willi, Down syndrome, and can't talk today, McDermott syndrome. Those are the ones that they have to have in order to qualify under guardian advocacy. If they don't have these, then they can't file for guardian advocacy. So these can be pursued without an attorney. Many counties in Florida have forms already that you can file. You can go online to the court website in your local county. You can look up guardian advocacy, and they have all the forms there for you to complete. So these are usually PDF forms that you can complete. Also, you can go to www.floridacourts.org. They may have the links to those different ones. These basically the training can be utilized online or in-person training. So you still have to do the training, you still have to do the background check, but you'll be able to do that without an attorney. Yes,
How many hours of training are involved?
usually it's 8.
Oh.
Yeah. So let's get to the good part of why we're here. So I want to give you guys some background, so now you can get into seeing how supported decision-making works, in my opinion, a little better. So what happens is we have a fundamental right of freedom to live as independently as possible, but we have responsibilities to ourselves, to our community, to society. But what is supported decision-making? So this is a process we all use to make choices of our lives. So we basically, everybody needs help making decisions. Nobody knows everything. We go to mechanics, we go to doctors, we go to, whoever we have in order to help us make decisions. And this is the same process. And so, and sometimes people have these little jargons and little, acronyms and their own little language. And you're like, what in the heck are they talking about? But those are the things where supportive decision making can help, because we use it every day. I like to use the example when I turned 18, I was in college, and okay, I'm gonna date myself, this is how old I am, yes I am. So during the bookstore, they had these booths, and there was these different banks for credit cards. And they were like, hey, sign up for this credit card, you'll get a Walkman. Yes, I'm old. Okay. So for those who too young to know what a Walkman is, it's kind of like a little radio, and you be able to listen to it. Now, Sony Walkman was very popular.
But you're not old.
Thank you. Okay. So what happened was, hey, sign up for this credit card. You'll get a Walkman. I didn't want a credit card. I wanted the free Walkman. So I signed up for the credit card. And then it was like, oh, a couple of weeks later, I got a credit card. And it was like, ooh, $500. Let's go to the mall, you know, not thinking really clearly that, oh yeah, I gotta pay this back, and I gotta pay this back with interest, you know, and basically I had to learn that lesson the hard way, but we all learn, and that's how we do in life. So just because somebody has a disability does not mean that they can't ever make a mistake, or they can't understand, they have to know everything, you know, and this is where supported decision making helps, because of the fact that we always learn. We all do. Because something new comes out all the time. I mean, I love my mom, but she just learned how to do that voice to text recognition text messages. And I get text messages this long. And they always start with Alicia. And I'm like, I'm your child. You should know my name. What she does is voice recognition text. So she learned how to do that because she wanted to be the cool kid of her crew. So I'm just like, okay. So this is where we're going to get that information, and we're going to talk about this because this is very important to us. So how somebody uses it, we all have trouble. So we collect information. We learn how, you know, how to make that decision. How do you understand it? You know, what are your options? What are the risks? What are the benefits? You know, and this is where being that circle of information for that person helps in supportive decision making. Because once they get that circle, they can make those decisions. And they'll be able to have that understanding of what this, you know, what they want to do next. You know, if somebody wants to go to college versus vocational school, or somebody wants to move out versus staying in, or maybe they want to work at a certain kind of job, and what does that entail for them to be able to get that job? All those kind of things, you know, even the credit card situation, you know, what do they do? And basically that circle of people that they trust could be able to help them. It could be one person, it could be more than one person. But with that supported decision making, it can help them make that decision without having a guardianship. So it's a process, and it happens when we keep that person being that decision maker. They still get to make the decision. We're just letting them know what their options are. We're letting them know, hey, you know, if you want to go to school, hey, how about talking to VR, and they can help you pay for going to college, or help you go to vocational school, or have a job coach. You know, well, let's talk to them. Or, hey, you know, maybe with medications, if you want to take that certain type of medication, the doctor says, you know, and this is what the doctor is saying, and this is how it's going to affect you. You know, do you really want to take it? You know, just talking to people for them to make that decision. And there's no one model, but at the same time, that's what supportive decision making is about. Okay, you want to go into a little bit of your experience a little bit, and you go back. You want to talk about it a little bit? Go for it.
So when I use supported decision making, there's a couple of ways you can use it. So supported decision making, you can use it as, like what we did was you get it notarized. So, and that was the boring part. I was like, are we done filling all these paperwork out? Because it was like a whole bunch of like papers I had to sign. But I use it kind of like the chain of command for like law enforcement basically, because I'm a law enforcement geek. You'll see me with a whole bunch of cops on any given day. But I usually mostly with my support team or with Stand Up for Independence. When I do like group outings, like the mom of the group, I always ask her for advice if I need to, or my uncle that lives in Vero, you know, sometimes I ask him. But it's mostly about the connections that you make out in the community or the people that you trust that really makes up the supported decision-making agreement.
So how does it factor into Florida law? All right, so the legislative intent for guardianship, if you look under 744, it says it's desirable to make the least restrictive form of guardianship to assist persons who are only partially capable of caring for their needs, and that alternatives to guardianship and less restrictive means of assistance be explored before the guardianship is appointed. Okay? This is in the legislative intent. And so what happens is, even in the annual plan that they have in guardianship, they ask the guardian every year, hey, is there any lesser, form of restrictive means of assistance could be made? Now, how many times do you think people actually complete that and fill it out and say, yes, it can be. Somebody learn how to manage their money, or somebody learn how to, pay their rent or do a bill, or they, learn how to drive a car. If I could tell you how frequently that happens, it really don't. There's a lot of times it's, okay, let me just fill in what I need to fill in to submit to the court to get on to the next year. Because what happens with guardianship, and a lot of people don't also know this, is that you have to keep up with this every single year with guardianship. Every year, depending on how the court runs it, you have to do what they call an annual plan, letting the court know what that person's been doing and going to be doing in that previous year and what they're going to be doing in the future in the year. They're also going to have a doctor sign off on it that they've been going to the doctor, they help them maintain what medications they're taking, what stuff they're doing, what school they're in, what job they work, whatever it may be. And you have to do that plan every year. You also have to do, depending on the type of annual, if you have a regular guardianship or guardian advocacy, is what they call annual accounting. So if that person has any money, you have to do a accounting form to the court every year so they can keep track of any assets they have, how the money was spent, what it was spent on, that sort of thing. And it's every year, and it has to be with an attorney. Yes?
Can the guardian be reimbursed for their time, for the work they do with the client?
Yes, they can. Typically, the guardian hourly rate is $65 an hour.
So that might be a reason they just go through the paperwork too and say, yep, let's go to next year.
Good idea. So what happens is it's typically $65 an hour. And what, that being said, that, like you said, incentive. The other thing that I have found in my work is what I call zombie guardianships. Unfortunately, we have where individuals, they can't afford to pay the attorney anymore, or, they just like, I'm done with this. I don't want to keep, answering to the court every year. And what happens is, after a while, the court does a hearing for a show cause. They want to come down and decide, make sure you do it or whatever, and it's not done, and then the court shuts it down. Okay, what do you do with that paper now? What is it? What's the value on it? Nobody knows. I asked several extra areas of the bar. I've asked people in the know, and they still like, So that type of thing, it could be problematic. If this is a thing where you're doing a guardianship, it's not a one-stop shop. It's an annual thing you have to keep up with every year. Okay, the supported decision making. So one court had found the supported decision making agreements were a powerful alternative to guardianship. So Mike, this is the court citation of Mike's case right here, and it happened in 2016. So if anybody has a question about it, you have legal support that it actually happened as he told you, as well as where the legal citation is. I try to give you guys information that you can take with you and use later on. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at regarding self-determination, person-centered planning, least restrictive. So we look at these, and these are different levels. So people, this is the most rights you got is the self-determination. You can do everything, you don't have to ask anybody. And then we go into a little bit lower, but it's circle of support. People you're asking questions, like Mike was talking about earlier, how he has people in his family and in his community that give him advice and direct him how to do certain things. We have advanced directives, we have living wills, power of attorneys, healthcare surrogates, banking services, trust, and then we get down to representative payee. Representative payee is a form for Social Security. Sometimes, and some guardianship cases occur, is because sometimes somebody's concerned that, hey, this person's gonna get a Social Security check, but I don't think they can manage the money themselves, and I'm afraid that, they're gonna run them up with it or somebody's gonna take advantage. You don't have to get a guardianship. You can get a representative payee where you just help them with that money. Yes, you're gonna have to account for that money. You're gonna have to make sure they're using it in the best interest of themselves. You can't just hand them over the check, but that's with Social Security funds. And in that way, you don't have to do a full guardianship if you're concerned about that. You can just use the representative payee and be able to do it. We'll talk about the banking services and stuff like that. The least court-imposed rights are regarding guardianships, and that sort of thing. So you can look at those. We talked about self-determination and, basically managing your own affairs, making your own judgment, your own decision. That's the optimal, what we're trying to look for as much as possible. To be able to control your life, to make meaningful choices, and to choose your lifestyle, your goals, your preferences. That's what we all want. you know? So why is anybody else not allowed to do it? So we have learning activities. So we got Ann, she's 18 years old, she's deaf, she has mild autism, she has a seizure disorder. She wants to move out of her family home and attend a local community college. And mother thinks she should move into a group home for young adults with developmental disabilities who need support services. Ann's support coordinator agrees. Is this self-determination?
No.
Why?
She's not making her own choice, the family is.
Exactly. The family is, she's saying she wants to go to college and she wants to move out and experience that. So that's one of the things you have to listen to the person, that person-centered situation. What do they want and how do we best do it in their best interest? So let's try our second question. Ann is on the Agency for Persons with Disabilities waiver. She receives Social Security. Her mother's her rep payee. Ann asks her parents, her support coordinator, high school guidance counselor, who she remains friends with, to attend a meeting to make some decisions about what she should do next and how those fundings and services she should receive should be applied if she wanted to go to college and move out. Now, is that self-determination?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's how that circle of support works. You know, just like Mike was talking about earlier about how he had his family and friends be able to help him, this is the same instance. Like, how do we get this? This is what I want, and this is going to work for me and positive for me. How do I get that goal? Yes.
I have a question. So what if you're in a situation where like two parents aren't together and they both want to be the guardianship of that person? Like, how do they decide? How does the law do that?
Well, the court would make that decision. And usually it's a lot of different factors, like who that person spends the most time with, who that person, you know, is interacting with the most. It just depends. I mean, sometimes I did have a case where both parents were fighting over a young adult and it was a guardianship situation. And, you know, sometimes it's for good reasons because they both love that individual so much, and sometimes it's for monetary reasons. You know, I have to be honest. But what happens is that, you know, that's something that the court has wide discretion to make that decision. So it depends on, you know, what the court has and what the basis they use it on. Okay. And support coordinator gives her a list of group homes to choose from. And this is an example of self-determination. She said nothing about living in a group home. Okay. Ann asked a support coordinator and her mother to help her prepare a budget and research options for available on-campus housing. Is this an example of self-determination? Yes, because Ann is like, look, I want to move on campus. I want to go to college. How do I get there? Okay, so that person-centered planning, the person who plan affects should be the one leading the process. And their decisions drive their wants and their financial abilities, and it's more respectful. Because if you make a decision without my input, then it can happen, a lot of things, negative things can happen. So we go out to eat and you're like, oh yeah, she wants that strawberry shortcake. Oops, sorry. She wants that strawberry shortcake, and you order it for me without my input, and I sit down and say, hey, why do you order this for me? I'm allergic to strawberries. It can kill me. So that situation is where that person who is that situation affects should be the one helping, leading that decision-making process. So we have tools. So some of the things that we have, right now we're trying to work on, if you want to talk about this a little bit, Mike, about iDecide, you want to talk about that in the coalition?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm the co-chair of iDecide Florida, and right now we are trying to pass an SDM law here in Florida. Sorry.
Start calling.
We have a we are doing an SDM law in Florida where we've attempted to do this bill twice. It did go into committee this past legislative session, and it did pass in the first committee. But you know, we are going to file it again. So if anyone, you know, is interested about following up on iDecide Florida, we have a website, which is www.idecideflorida.org. Or we have a Facebook page, we have Twitter, we have Instagram. Listen, I'm all over the place. I'm gonna be honest. Too much to count. So.
Okay. So let's look at the tools. So the different tools that you could also use in the meantime until we get that wonderful law passed, there's tools that we could use. So for example, healthcare surrogates and living wills. You don't need an attorney for this. You could create a healthcare surrogate form, and basically that provides somebody to speak on their behalf if they're unable to for medical decisions. Okay, you could also do a living will. It's a document that expresses what they want if they, in an event of a terminal illness or end-stage condition or persistent vegetative state. So this is a legal document where you're telling people, look, if something happens to me and I can't speak on my own behalf, this is what I want you to do. This came about through the Terry Schiavo case. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was unfortunate. There was, the family, her birth family versus her married family, basically, having a conflict in regarding, her end of life and whether or not what her wishes would be. And one of the things that came out of that is that they, Florida wanted people to basically say, hey, ahead of time, let us know what your wishes are so we don't have that battle if you can't speak for yourself. So they're also known as advanced directives, and it allows people to know what your wishes are. Sometimes you get these from your doctor, and sometimes you can get them online. I can show you where to get those. But those, anybody can use those. You don't have to be a person with a disability. Anybody can use those, and I highly suggest people do that because of the fact that you never know. It's always a helpful situation. Bless you. So if you go to a living will, you can go on Florida Statute 765.303, and you have a suggested one already there. All you gotta do is copy and paste it. And it's free. If you do a healthcare surrogate, this is a document that basically gives permission for another person while you're receiving medical care to help you make medical decisions. And this is in writing. Upon you signing it and everything, it takes effect immediately. So you can complete that while an attorney. It can be used in a supported decision-making process, especially letting people know what they want in regarding healthcare. And it provides somebody to speak to them on their behalf if they're unable to. I had one case where, I'll go back. I'll go forward. So basically in this situation, it says every competent adult has a fundamental right of self-determination regarding their decisions pertaining to his or her own health, and that includes a right to choose or refuse medical treatment. Okay? So basically you're letting them know, look, if I have a choice, this is what I want, and the Florida law provides for it. This is the legislative intent for the healthcare surrogate. If a facility is giving you problems with it, see, this is how I'm a troublemaker. If they do that, they can have subject to professional discipline or revocation of their license or certification and a fine not more than $1,000 per incident if they basically do not respect the healthcare surrogate form. So there is, like for healthcare providers, if they did not respect it, there's penalties.
So,
Yes.
so if you were to have the health surrogate form that that I'm her surrogate, then would I take this as well, just as a precaution if they?
You could.
They, like they carry around the guardianship, you could carry this, and that way.
That it would help. You can also get it from the statute because I cite the whole thing. Google
Right, that's
that.
what I mean, but I could
You
take
can
that.
Google that
Okay.
right up here and put it in and print it out, and there you go.
Right. Okay.
So that basically has a situation where they have to respect it. And you also can report down to the Florida Department of Elder Affairs too, to let them know that they're supposed to adopt it and supposed to be able to use it. So if you go to Florida Statute and 465.203, there's a form already there you can copy and paste for adults. And they also have one, 765.2038, and that's used for children. So I had a case where it was a grandmother. And the grandmother had a daughter with a developmental disability. And the daughter basically, had a daughter of her own. So it's actually the person was a grandmother. And the granddaughter had some, disabilities where she had to go to a therapeutic daycare. And the child came home one day from the therapeutic daycare and she had mosquito bites all over. And she had a really bad reaction to it. and grandma wanted to know what was going on. And so the daycare was basically telling me it was a therapeutic daycare, so it was just like, oh, well, we don't have to tell you anything. Well, grandma had already completed one of these for the minor. She copied, pasted, signed it, did everything she was supposed to do, and turned it into them. And they were just like, well, you have to talk to our general counsel. So when I jumped in, general counsel was like, oh, no, we don't have to do that. We don't have to follow that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll tell you what, last time I checked, this is the Florida statute. So you want to go to court with me and explain to a judge why you do not feel that Florida law applies to you, let's go. And he was just like, oh, but I don't like it. We'll talk to your legislator, but in the point right now, it's the law. So basically, grandma got all the information she needed about what she needed to find out about her grandchild. Okay? So advanced directives, we talked about that. And then we also talked about the REP payee program. With Social Security, they can determine if you need one. And it helps for management of Social Security benefits. There is an annual accounting form. That's usually now for businesses and facilities. They usually don't ask the parents or the caregiver. If you're a parent and you have a young adult living in living in a house with you getting Social Security benefits, they don't typically ask for annual accounting. So what happens is that there's a form that they have the doctor fill out, and what happens is if you become the REP payee, they can send the check to you, but you're responsible to make sure that that's used in the best interest of that person receiving the money. The other thing is once that person gains skills to handle that money themselves, because some people do that. They say, hey, I'm gonna teach you about money, I'm gonna teach you about paying bills, and once they get that ability to handle the money themselves, you can always tell Social Security, hey, you know, Johnny knows how to use the money himself now, I don't need to be REP payee anymore. So you can do that. Power of attorney, this is a legal document that gives somebody the power to act on the place of another person. And there's a power of attorney, it must be signed by 2 witnesses and a notary to be considered a legal binding document. Yeah, please, if you get these, make sure you get a good one. That is for Florida. Don't go to Office Depot and get the book. You'd be surprised with some of them they have written on those. And this can also go along with the supported decision-making agreement. This is a little different because it changes the rights, not the rights per se, but it changes the power to make decisions from one person to another, but it does avoid guardianship. So that's one thing. You can do it for education, you can do it for finances, you can do it for health. You can do it for all 3. Basically, you're giving another person the authority to speak on your behalf, and so you can do that. Durable power of attorney, if that person later on becomes incapacitated, that power of attorney can be revoked. So as long as they have capacity, they can sign a durable power of attorney. As long as the court said, hey, you're not incapacitated, you can sign one of these. And what happens is durable power of attorney is special because even if that person suffers a mental incapacity in the future, then it can stay in place. It won't be revoked. Okay? Banking options. So you have a young person, and you have a young person that wants to be able to handle money, and you want to give them that leeway, but you want to see what's going on. You can become a co-signer on that account, and you can check the stuff online. So you can say, hey, Johnny, I noticed you spent $500 on Pokemon cards. You know, what's going on with that? Let's discuss that, you know, because you know you have to pay your car payment and your car insurance. And by you paying $500 on Pokemon, you know, that keeps you from being able to pay your car payment and your bills. You may want to take those Pokemon cards back because otherwise they're going to take your car and you're going to mess up your credit. You know, give those options and discuss it with people, and then that way you'll be able to do that and look at their finances and keep up with it. That's one option you can do without having to do a guardianship.
And if he wants to keep his Pokemon cards, he can watch the tow truck take his car away.
Exactly. But that's all of us. That is the decision we all make when we make, you know, certain decisions. You know, there's good consequences and bad consequences. Like, okay, Felicia, do you really need that extra chocolate chip cookie? You know, yeah, I'm gonna have consequences tomorrow, and probably my luck 10 years down the road. But you know, but that's something that we all make a decision on every day. Trust. We can have trust where we can put money in trust. They have special needs trust. So, and here's the thing: there's 2 sides of this. So the person gets a certain amount of money, and you're like, okay, but if they have all this money and they're getting like SSI or having Medicaid benefits, they're no longer supposed to have assets more than $2,000, right? What do I do with this extra money? And there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can put it into a special needs trust, so it doesn't impact their public benefits, but if it's a small amount, you can do an Able United account. Able United, I think it's like $16,000 a year. If you have SSI, you can have up to $100,000. If it's SSDI, it's $436,000. You know, so that way you can make sure that they help them stay on public benefits, but yet they can use that money other than, you know, food, clothing, shelter type of situation. Medical proxies, if they don't have a dual power of attorney, have a proxy to speak on their behalf if they lack capacity or have a DD. So why do we need a supported decision-making agreement if we have POAs and other alternatives? And we get questions asked by certain members of the bar. The transference of power. So once you have the power of attorney, you're granting somebody else to speak on your behalf. But a supported decision-making agreement basically keeps the power to the person that it affects. They keep the power to make that decision. Okay, so that's clear as mud, right? So we want to do less restrictives as that first option. I always tell people, let's go down the list first. Let's not just jump into guardianship. Let's see what else works first. If nothing else works, that's fine. But let's just see what works first. Because capacity is not a fixed concept. It's going to change. You know, I have one of my children is an individual with a disability. One of my children is neurotypical. And what happens is that sometimes the one with the development disability knows more than how to do something my neurotypical. I'm like, God, you kidding me? Some of their decisions. But both of them have the right to make certain decisions. I'll tell them, hey, this is the way to do it. This is the way not to do it. These are the consequences. You make that decision. You know? And as they gotten older, you know, both of them start learning more stuff, and I don't have to, like, you know, lose my mind as much, but they learn. So, are there any questions? Yes.
In shared decision making, if you're at an impasse, the person wants something and the parent or the person that's assisting and guiding them does not feel it's in their best interest or it's possibly dangerous, what prevails?
It depends on the consequences of what that decision is. You know what I mean? You know, because that's with any adult. You know, it's like, hey, you don't make that car payment, they're gonna tow your car away, and you're gonna mess with your credit. And you're gonna tell that person that, and it's like, oh no, I still want to go to Universal for the week. You know, they have that right to make that decision, even though it's not in their best interest.
So
But they got to deal with the consequences. But that's with any adult.
Right. So there's no veto power there. If that person makes the decision, even though you inform them, then that's the way it is.
To a certain extent, but that's with any adult. I mean, that's with any adult, you know? I mean, I had some stuff where I told my adult daughter, hey, this is the way to go, and she decided the opposite, and then she realized water was wet, and it was like, oh, there's a consequence? I told you that, you know, but you made that decision, you know? Her favorite saying growing up when she was a teenager, I want to learn how to make my own mistakes. Okay, the consequences to mistakes, go for it. You know, it may tear you up inside. Trust me, I've seen, it was times where I was like, I want to protect her and keep her in a bubble, or my son keep them in a bubble, but at the same time, they still have to, it makes them, they still have to grow up in this world, because we're not going to be here forever. And the more they get used to making decisions and doing things, then, and making them less dependent on us, the more they're protected, because if you don't do that and keep them in that bubble, they're more vulnerable, you know? Because people can tell them anything and they think it's real or true versus, oh no, that was not my experience. I did this before. No, that's not true. You know?
What would happen if, my son needed some kind of life-saving surgery, but he was on here and he's saying, no, I don't want that, and because he just doesn't want to go to the hospital. It's not because he quite understands the scope of it. So
I mean, they have what they call DNRs. So if somebody wanted to do not resuscitate.
Yeah, but that's different.
It's different, because they're afraid of getting a shot, so they
Exactly.
won't go.
Okay, they
That's
won't get a
completely-
shot.
Exactly.
Okay,
It's
something
completely different. There's a fear, it's a fear, thing, and they don't really understand the concept of needing some life-saving surgery. All they remember is they don't wanna go to the hospital, because, that's where they draw the line. I don't want my blood drawn.
The judgment's impaired.
Exactly, so I'm just trying to think through this.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
like I
trying-
said, it's not,
and-
it's a spectrum of things. You
And
don't
it's
have to like
so
stay on
maybe this
one.
might not be for him.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there may be a situation where you can sit down and talk to him, or somebody else can sit down and talk to him and get him to understand how necessary that particular surgery is. And if he hears it and basically understands it enough and it's made in terms that he can understand, he'd be like, oh, okay, I am scared, but I need it. You know what I mean? So it may be a situation where, yes, that may be, because maybe mom's saying it, and maybe another person, like the doctor or a nurse or, a peer or somebody else who had it before talks to them about it, they may understand it a little better, And that's the thing. Like I said, this is a spectrum of stuff. You don't always have to, like I said, I always say use least restrictive first, and if you have to go up the chain, go up the chain. But my thing is that at first we need to at least start the least restrictive, at least to see decision-making situations. Have those discussions, even though it's not easy, so they can understand certain things and we communicate those things. So like I said, with the life-saving surgery situation, if you explain it to them and how vital it is and how much better their life can be, they may be of something that they understand. And then, like I said, they may not always understand things from mom, but they may understand some from somebody else. Yes, I'm sorry, in the back.
Am I understanding correctly there's a difference between each state, like each state has their own guardianship rules?
Yes, they do.
Okay, all right.
And Florida does not have reciprocity with anybody.
Okay.
We don't play nicely in the sandbox in a lot of different ways. So, we're not part of that uniform guardianship code that some other states have where they agree to, cross state lines, stuff, basically in Florida, you'll start from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, you have a question?
Yeah, well, I've got two questions. Well, first of all, to go with what she's saying, can we do, say, guardian advocacy for health and then supported decision-making for other things?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things with guardian advocacy, a lot of the forms you'll see with the county forms, they'll have each right listed.
Right.
And you can have that discussion with that individual and you can check off. And it doesn't have to be a permanent thing. So in a situation like your son, he may agree, okay, I don't understand health stuff right now. Mom, I'll let you have that right or that power for now. Okay? And then at that point in time, they may go at the court and say, look, I've learned about my health. I learned how to take care of my health better. Can we, judge, take that off and give that right back to me? That may be a way to do it. Or it may be a way, like I said, with the decision-making agreement, you can agree to, hey, from now till XYZ time, that you let me help you with this, and I have a healthcare surrogate, and we can do this way together. There's all kinds of conversations you can have in order to do it. This is not like one size fits all. There's things that you can do in order to make it work for you.
Okay. The other question I had was you're saying supported decision-making agreement. Is this a piece of paper? Is this a contract? Is it like a
Yeah.
uniform thing?
You-
I mean, I know the law isn't there, but I mean, is there like a drafted contract that people could kind of use in the meantime?
So, there's a lots of way you can do a supported decision-making agreement. And when I first, let me tell you, when I first heard about SDM, I'm like, what the heck, there's a what? This is a what? I didn't even know what it was. But when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty, and it is a paper. But
Is it just something we have to just like make up? This is like
No, I mean, you can contact Disability Rights Florida. We've done it in the past. We've had an Equal Justice Fellow that was helping people do it and had a decision-making agreement, and they were able to assist them in that process, and be able to get that done. Like I said, not all, counties gonna recognize it, but one of the reasons why I put Michael's case in the presentation is to show that a court in Florida already made that okay. Yes.
I was just gonna add that on the I Decide Florida website, there's a sample, supported decision-making agreement that you can, reference and see if it's something that suits you. And also, you know, written agreements aren't the only way. If you or your child or family friend or whoever is the person that you're going into this agreement with, if they communicate better with visuals or videos or audio, it doesn't have to be a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So you can learn more about that on the I Decide Florida website.
And another question, sorry about this, but, can the state, the government, someone, like prosecute us for not taking guardianship? Or, you know, or some of these, controls, the, healthcare surrogate, you know, all this, the power of attorney, all those things that you mentioned, and some harm comes to them because we didn't do that. We were not restricted enough with an adult.
That depends, I mean, because technically that person's an adult.
Yeah.
So once you reach the age of the adult, the rights and stuff confer to that person. So, you know, if this is a situation where you're helping them, you know, there's all different kind of things, but they couldn't prosecute you for not telling an adult what to do. That's like you're trying to tell me what to do, and you're saying that state gonna prosecute you for you trying to tell me what to do. I'm over 18, way over 18, but I'm over 18. So, you know, it's the same difference. Just because you're related, once those rights leave you and go to them, they can't prosecute you for that. No.
Yeah. 'Cause, I was just thinking about discussions I've had with my son across the street, you know, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna go. It's like, okay.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, there's discussions of trainings. There's, if you have like a local paratransit in your area, sometimes they do trainings on how to obtain the bus, and that includes how to cross the street safely. There's, you know, sometimes videos that he can watch regarding crossing the streets safely. So there's all kinds of different ways to kind of train that. And I know sometimes, like I said, I understand from your perspective, it can be scary, but at the same time, the more prepared our young people are, the better. Because then, you know, somebody unsavory come along, it protects them more.
So, sure, so, you know, and again, I mean, it's like, the relative, or the neighbor, or the state itself, you know, just like see you because you didn't make your kid go to the hospital, even though he was an adult and his appendix was bursting, or he was, you know, something, he was bleeding or something, you know what I mean? Or if you didn't.
But as long as they were not found incapacitated by a court, they're still an adult. They can make those decisions.
Okay, so it's just like if we don't go, we say, you know, we don't think it's so serious, so we don't go over it, something bad happens, then, you know.
I mean,
it's like we're not-
but that's just like if you told me, okay, Felicia, you need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. And I got a big train nail sticking out the side of my head. And I decide not to go to the hospital. I made a decision as an adult not to go.
Even if you're developmentally, even if you're intellectually disabled.
But at the same
With
time,
that
until
in
you,
that borderline area.
but until you found incapacitated by an adult, you still have the right to make those decisions.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
How does this work with the situations, because I just came from the one with the police where multiple examples of kids with autism, just because they crossed the street not at the crosswalk, were taken to the jail. How, if they have their complete support in this way, how do we use this? Because I actually really believe in a lot of support, you know, a lot of him doing a lot of things. But I also want to be able to protect him and be able to talk for him when there's a situation where, like that.
I mean, it's not necessarily where you need to need guardianship. It may be, like I said, a discussion of, okay, do I need a power of attorney? Do I need a, you know, supported decision-making agreement with the power of attorney? Do I need a, you know, some sort of.
So a power of attorney would then.
It gives you,
police
depending
officers-
on what it is, it gives you the power to speak on somebody's behalf because you have a legal right to.
Okay, so that would resolve that issue, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have
Yes.
a question back there?
I'm just trying to understand, so the supportive decision-making agreement, if you have something in writing, is that legal and binding? And if so, who can alter that? Who makes
Well, right
changes?
now, until that law actually passes, what they've been doing is a patchwork. So they've been doing the supported decision-making agreement, to discuss what the powers of the decision-making process is, but then they still also have the power of attorney, which is enforced to be able to be used. So depending on the type of power of attorney you use, you can use a financial one, an educational one, a health one, that sort of thing. It just depends on the level of that person's abilities. Like I said, all of it is a concept, and it's going to be fixed to individualize, fit that person. So it's a spectrum of situations. It's not like, you know, one size fits all.
And can you give me an example of what you've seen in one of those agreements? Like what type of, what would be listed there? Like,
I mean, it'll be listed of who speaks on my behalf in regarding health. Who helps me decide decisions on how to handle my money. Things like that. It discusses those type of areas and topics, and who is that person that I talk to, and it has a list of people. And if that person's not available, who else can I talk to? That sort of thing. And regarding communicating, so it lists out what who's supposed to do what and when, and if that person's not available or that people are not available, who else can I do it for, and what circumstances they can do it with.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I just thought of a quick thing, because I asked about money last time, and that is, can they be reimbursed? If the person chooses that person and the person really needs to be reimbursed for their time, will they be able to reimburse them for helping them make their decisions? Because sometimes you might have to hire a CPA.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna hire a CPA, you're gonna hire a CPA. You know what I mean? That's the situation that's necessary. Just like a lawyer, you're gonna hire a lawyer. For that. Just give the advice or whatever. That's gonna be that room, but that person's making that decision to get that specialized advice. So it's not necessarily.
So it could still be part of their circle though?
Yeah.
And it could be somebody that they could reimburse?
Correct. I mean, nobody has to do it
That
for
makes
free.
a lot of sense, because sometimes you're not always gonna have a circle of expertise that you need for every situation for advice.
Yeah, but as a lawyer, I'll be like, hey, in what instances, how much, and do I get my invoice every month?
But that's your lawyer language.
Yeah, I'm always gonna throw that in.
Okay, so what if the person calls you for that advice and he doesn't have any money? And he doesn't tell you that he doesn't have any money?
What do you mean?
That's just like, you just send a bill to the collection and, and he winds up in that kind of trouble.
No, not necessarily. I mean, here's the thing though. If for example, somebody came to me and I'm a client, I need a client. They come to me as a client. If I'm a private attorney, I'm going to be talking to you and I'm like, hey, this is your rights, this is what's going on, but yet you're going to sign a retainer agreement. And in that retainer agreement, I'm going to point out, hey, this is how much per hour, or this is how much I'm going to need as a retainer, and this is how the retainer is going to be used, and this is how I'm going to be billing you, and all of that kind of stuff. So they would know ahead of time before I start really doing work for real, how much they're going to have to pay. And it's still going to be billed. I mean, just like anybody, if you get a car fixed or anything, if you're using somebody's, talents and services and skills, that basically is going to, basically as long as they lay it out on the line of what it is, it's anything before you start. I mean, definitely a lot of different things. No, I mean,
what they're ready for,
Guardian advocacy is one of those 7 statutory conditions that we talked about, right? And usually they look at levels of intellectual capacity and stuff like that. So those, if you're doing a guardian advocacy, it has to be one of those 7. And in addition to that, they have to show what their capability is, These could be from IEPs, they can be from psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors, school teachers, all of this information that you already get in regarding what that person has the ability to do. The other thing I tell people to do is, hey, if you got vocational rehabilitation, you can always sign up for that, try to get your young person, working skills. They do a vocational and a psychological evaluation anyway. So they can show proofs and skills of what they can and cannot do.
Okay, so that shows what it can or cannot do. So then who can view that and say, yeah, this is a good candidate for supported decision making versus, yeah, I want to have guardian advocacy for someone else.
Sometimes they have it in the report.
Pardon me?
I've seen it in reports, in psychological reports, in psychiatric reports, I've seen it.
Yeah, I have, it's not in my son, so I don't know.
I mean-
It's like, it seems to me like he's kind of between.
And that, like I said, if he's interested in working, vocational rehabilitation would help. And then they also do a vocational evaluation as well as a psychological evaluation to see what their skill levels are. And they could probably give you more guidance to try to help him of which way he should go.
You went to guardianship and guardian advocacy, and we were shocked when the court gave us that.
Oh, wow. Yes, yes.
It's a little bit different, but-
Two quick questions. You guys serve Miami-Dade County?
We serve the whole state.
Okay, second question. What you just mentioned about employment, I mean, as I navigate these new waters for, becoming my child becoming a legal adult, I found out some places don't hire the child or the individual because under guardianship, or some college don't take the individual because it's under guardianship.
Yeah.
I mean, will the supported decision making, the way it's being written and pushed, will be an alternative for those
Yes.
cases?
Yes.
So,
Go ahead.
So in my case, I'm actually a graduate from Indian River State College. I got my state licensed security officer course, and I was able to retain my state license, which is in Florida, which it's ridiculous, I get it, but in Florida, you're by law required to have a state license to be a security officer in the state. So the fact that with supported decision making, which I was under a supported decision making agreement at that time, I was able to go to college and retain that state license so I could go to work and and then before I got that state license, I had to do a background check with the Florida Department of Agriculture before they even gave me my license. So, and because I had supported decision making, I was able to get that state license, and now I work as actually getting ready to be promoted as another supervisor for another site. So,
Yes.
Is there anybody in the bill, because I haven't read the bill, I'm sorry to say, that is excluded, such as a case manager or support coordinator that could not be involved in that circle of support?
Okay. Caitlin, you want to answer that question?
Yeah. Hi. I'm Caitlin. I work for DRF also, and I've been helping out on this. The bills that we've done before, there were a couple different versions of them. And yeah, I think in the original bill, there were some limitations about who could be a supporter, to make sure that it's not someone who's got a financial interest. I think the supporter can't be their employer.
Yes.
That sort of thing. So yeah, there were limits, and if you're interested, the I Decide Florida website, this year we haven't decided which bill we're gonna file, but as soon as we do, it'll be on that website and you'll be able to see what we're doing. And if you have any opinions about that, about what kind of bill we should file, because we've had two versions. The first one was a bill that would be supported decision making for anyone who wanted to use it. We didn't make very much progress with that, so then we limited it to just people with developmental disabilities. So it wouldn't cover people with, elderly folks. It wouldn't cover, a whole range of other people, just people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So, if you have input about what you would like to see, also go to the I Decide website, and there's a form where you can contact us and let us know what you think, or get involved in the coalition also. But yeah, we do very much want to make sure that the supporters are people who truly have the interest of that person at heart, and not just someone who has a financial interest.
And I can understand that, because it could be a consequence of a choice that the person is making, and I would always fall to choice rather than maybe they would make a mistake. And so in my opinion, I'd rather have him, if he has a relationship with this person who's trusted for years, I'd rather have him choose that person on his team than somebody, that he's not as familiar with and doesn't necessarily have as much interest in heart. But that's just a personal experience. It's not everybody's experience, and it doesn't mean that things can't change. But she's wealthier than the Jesus, so I'm not worried about it running off with his $2.95. But you can see from that point, there is a different point of view of that you should, if you're gonna have choice, have choice.
Exactly.
And if the person who has the supported decision-making agreement says, hey, my supporter, I don't think you really have my interest at heart, they've retained all their rights, so they can change their own agreement and name a new supporter. Say, you're no longer my supporter, now this person's my supporter.
But there are people at this point in time in the
In the
Bill.
proposed law, yes,
The
there are
proposed bill,
limits on who.
that does exclude people who may have a financial interest.
Yeah, yeah, like an employer, someone who has, you know, it's in their interest to have them come work all the time and make minimum wage instead of more, you know, we wouldn't want that kind of situation.
Well, I don't want her to retire, but I do want her. He does want her. All right, thank you, I understand that point of view.
If we wanted to do this, supported, decision-making, and we can pretty much do it on our own, right? With the different forms you've laid, and all the tools that you've you've given us.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have to necessarily call you unless we get stuck, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have to wait for the statute either.
And right now in Florida, we have 2 people that's actually using SDM right now. So, you know, it's making headway here in the state of Florida, which,
Yay! Who's the other person? Are you allowed to tell?
Well,
You know?
Another person.
Private,
yeah,
another
but
person.
they're in
Sorry, I'm
Miami-Dade County,
nosy.
believe it or not, so, the other people that been actually using it.
Well, that's good.